Our topic is the Bible and what's it really about. Genki desu ka? Hola, que paso, salam, shalom, bonjour. Whatever you say to say hello, welcome. This is a presentation on trying to bring alive the Bible and what it is really about, because the bottom line is most of you have no interest. And then the question is, why? First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Al. When I'm in Central America, I go by Alfredo. When I used to live in Scandinavia, it's pronounced Alfred. And in Israel, they simply pronounce it El, E-L. I mention these places and these different cultures because each is involved very much so in the scriptures and many more places that I have not discussed. It's called the world in which we live. And I mention this because we're all involved, and thereby so are you. The question is, what is your stake in it? Do you feel involved? And the bottom line is, for most of you, it's not the case. It's not the case, and the question is why? And the answer seems that it can only go back to religious people. In this, I know that some of my Jewish friends will disagree with me. They feel possibly that they are the only ones that know the scriptures. After all, most of it is in Hebrew, and it's larger Old Testament than the New Testament. So I understand that. They certainly have a great handle on the Hebrew in what's in a name, and I wish that they were a lot more public with this because we could certainly glean off of them a lot of their knowledge. Nonetheless, when I ask a lot of my friends, Jewish and Catholic, and I've been to Israel many times, they invariably come back with the same answer, and that is, I don't understand it. Jewish and Catholic particularly. And when I try to come to a conclusion, how is this the case, it always seems to go back to the rabbis and the priests. And the bottom line is, you've never been taught the scriptures because you can't read the scriptures. And if you don't read the scriptures, you can't know what's in them, can you? And my Jewish friends, I must say, you spend way too much time on your Talmud and Kabbalah. You should go back to Torah. There's a lot more there. And if it is a revelation of your God to the rest of the world, including you, then that means it's opening up more and more all the time. But it's not only you, it's the world, and thereby the rest of us too. Okay, that being said, what can we say? Religion. Okay, man is under the cloak of religion, sometimes more conservatively at different cultures, different times, but religion seems to have its love of itself. It has its rules, its regulations, its taboos, what to like, what not to like, what to think, what not to think. However, for many of you who are thinking, aware people, this is something that you run from. But as you run, what do you know? You're leaving the scriptures, the Bible behind, and you don't know what it's really talking about. And the problem is this. We live in a world that is changing. We live in a world where the so-called climate experts are telling us almost daily now that if the temperature just goes up 2 to 3 degrees, 10, 12 years, that's all the time you got. All hell is going to break loose. Well, I see them as not exactly experts. I see them rather as secular priests. And as such, they're not going to tell you exactly what is happening either in their school of thought, their school of thinking, depending who they're working for. However, the scriptures have been telling us since the beginning what is taking place. Only we haven't been listening because we haven't been reading them. We haven't had an interest, particularly our generation. So the situation is that as we take a look at the scriptures, you want to know about Satan, you want to know about the real hell, it's here. Christ, Satan, temptation, falling, getting man's self together, and living forever. And this is something that the enemy doesn't want you to know about. Men have been bought in the past and they're bought today. And they have a tendency to be not so much religious men, but leaders that religious men look up to and have to get along with. There is a compromise taking place here, and unfortunately it has alienated most of you. And you don't have what I call an interest to even look. The purpose of this video is to show that we're all involved, no matter what culture you live, no matter what country you come from. And my Jewish friends, you're going to start to see that the scriptures involve you particularly, because you're a major player and we need you on this. So I encourage all of you to follow us along and take a look, measure things by the scriptures. Don't believe me, I don't believe you, and let everybody come to the fullness of what the Bible is all about. Continuing with our topic, do you read? Is the question. Now I know it sounds like a silly question, but maybe let me put it a different way. Were you born running? Listen, we all came out between our mother's feet and didn't know nothing. We all crawled first. So, with that said, now to our story, the old story. And it begins with, do you read or write Chaldean script? You know, Babylonian script. That's one. That's two. Next question. Do you read or do you write Persian cuneiform? That's a little bit similar. That's one. That's two. Suppose I drew this picture Have you ever seen anything like this? Actually, it's not Colonel Sanders' bow tie, and it's not something you wear to the office. This is actually an Egyptian hieroglyph. And in the Valley of the Kings, just west of Luxor, Egypt, you'll find lots of them. You tread through the desert for about an hour and a half. You come into these tombs. It's about 120% humidity. You go inside and you see a lot of everyday things. Cats, dogs, bulls, gods, goddesses. But what always amazes me when I go there is the amount of colors, very brilliant. But there seems to be 3 colors that are very repetitive, and those are blue, white, and red. But that's a story for another video. Continuing with what we are talking about in relation to our topic, do you read? My next question is, do you read Paleo Canaanite script? You know, pictographs. And you'll be amazed that actually most of you do. It's just nobody has ever really told you. For if you take a look at your cell phones and laptops, the very alphabet that you're using is Paleo Canaanite script, 3,000 years ago. Okay, learning to read. I always believe the best place to begin is in the beginning. So, open your Bibles to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning. Genesis 1:1. Genesis 1:1. Although this is a Greek word, In English, it has come down to us through Webster's dictionary to mean the origin of or the beginning of something. Beginning of something. Well, we all have a beginning. For example, a timeline. Your timeline. For example, let's just say we say the year is 1970. That's when you were born. Well, what was happening at that particular time? We had Nixon. He was president. He was the man. Everybody knew this. There was another big event that everybody knew about, 1989. Do you remember what that is? Well, that's when the old evil empire, the USSR, the United Soviet Socialist Republic, fell apart. Today we have Vladimir. Well, you're still going because you don't care so much about Vladimir, and you get married about 1995. So you're married. This is a big event for you. By, say, 98, you have 2 kids, and by 2010, you're divorced. Okay, that's your timeline. We all have one. If these events are historical, they can be tracked. And if they can be tracked, they can be measured. We all have one. But I want to share with you something that is much older than this and involves all of us, and it does very much involve the beginning. We take another timeline like this, and in relation to the scriptures, it's unanimously agreed that at least the first 5 books of the Bible, called the Torah, was written by Moses. By Moses. He lived about 1500 BCE, before the Common Era. And he wrote Genesis, in the beginning. What we have to ask ourselves is, well, where did Moses come from? And we know that he came from Egypt. Remember the Passover, the Israelites came out of Egypt. And the question is, how old is Egypt? Well, I tell you, every time I go to the Metropolitan Museum in New York City, they keep pushing the age further back. And last time I was there, they came out with somewhere about 3,200 BCE when it started. Egypt, pyramids, sarcophagi, the Nile, pharaohs, Valley of the Kings. But still, there is an older civilization, even than that. And we find this in Genesis 10. And we go way back here to a man called Nimrod. And Nimrod built the first city. And the name of that city was Babel. Babylon, the first. You're going to see this name pop up repetitively. But the first Babylon can be tracked somewhere about 4000 BCE. So, we talked about cuneiform before. We talked about Chaldean script. We talked about Egyptian hieroglyphics. Time we get to Moses, Moses is the period of the Paleo-Canaanite, which basically means Israelite languages. There's more than one. And I already told you that they're on your phone and laptop, and you're actually using them. You just don't know it. Like this. To give it a little bit of perspective, advancing down the timeline about another 500 years, we'll come to King David, the first king to unite the 12 tribes and form the kingdom of Israel. But there's still another civilization for our purposes that we need to mention, and that's only about another 200 years after King David unites Israel, and this would be the Greeks. Certainly not a united Greek like at the time of Alexander, but a people that had taken this original Mosaic Canaanite Paleo language, which now at the time of King David is what we know as Hebraic language, or Hebrew. And the Greeks will take that same script, and A becomes A, B becomes Ba, and C becomes Ka. Another 800 years down the line, we come to Christ. He lived about 3 BCE, and way down here we are. This is us. And the year is 2018, almost 2019. What is the purpose of all this? The purpose is this Paleo Canaanite language will eventually evolve into Hebraic. The Greeks will get a hold of it, put vowels on it, a, ba, ka, da. Thereby, the language that we're speaking is actually Paleo-Canaanite, and then it will evolve into Hebrew. So, the purpose of all this is to show you that the big picture, the origin of the beginning of something, can be measured and tracked, and thereby can be read.